said we'll. Yes. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome councillors and staff to this meeting of Glamorgan Spring Bay Council on Tuesday, the 27th of June, 2023. I declare the meeting open at 2:01 p.m. Glamorgan Spring Bay Council acknowledges the traditional owners of our region and recognises their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. All councillors are in attendance today. So we therefore have no apologies or leave of absence. In attendance in staff, we have General Manager Mr. Greg Ingham, the Director of Works and Infrastructure, Mr. Peter Porch, the Director of Planning and Development, Mr. Alex Woodward, the Director of Corporate and Community, Mr. Lise Blaine, Planner, Mr. James Bonner, and our Planning Consultant, Mr. Mick Purvis, as well as our Executive Officer, Mrs. Jasmine Kerr. Thank you. Agenda item 1.5 is late reports. I understand from the General Manager that we have a late report, which will be at 8.5. Councillor Woods, thank you.
I'll move that late agenda item 8.5 insurance renewal 2023-24 JLT be accepted into the agenda.
Seconder, Deputy Mayor, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion's carried. Thank you. Agenda item 1.6, the declaration of interest or conflict. I now request elected members to indicate whether they have any interest personally or via a close associate as defined in section 49 of the Local Government Act 1993, or any conflict as described in Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors in any item included in the agenda. All right, thank you. Agenda item 2 is the ordinary meeting minutes of the council meeting on the 23rd of May. Thank you. Deputy Mayor, thank you.
I'll move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on the 23rd of May 2023 at 2 p.m. be confirmed as a true and correct record.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Churchill, thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion's carried unanimously. Agenda item 2.2 is the date and purpose of workshops held. I note that there are 3 which require separate recommendations. Is that correct, General Manager, or could we do it all in one? That we receive and note the information.
I think because there's 3 separate recommendations, Madam Mayor, we should do them as separate.
Do them separately. That's fine. So the first recommendation is on page 7. Councillor Woods, thank you.
Thank you. I move the council notes the information.
The Deputy Mayor, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion's carried unanimously. The next workshop was Tuesday, the 6th of June. Councillor McQueenie, thank you.
I move that council notes the information.
Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Edwards, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Tuesday, the 13th of June, recommendation is on page 9. Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Council notes the information.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Woods. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 2.3 is the minutes of the Glamorgan Spring Bay Audit Panel. There is a recommendation on page 11. Councillor Young, thank you.
I move that council receives and notes the attached minutes of the Glamorgan Spring Bay Council Audit Panel meetings held on 24 May 2023.
Seconder, please. Councillor McQueenie, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Churchill, I believe you're all for.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion's carried. Thank you. Agenda item 3 is the questions on notice. There are a number of questions there which I will ask the General Manager to comment on and deal with. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The questions come from 3 of our residents or ratepayers. They answered there in full. I don't think the Mayor wants me to read out the answers, but that's there for the public record. Happy to receive any questions.
Did I see there were some follow-up questions from one of the people, which they'll be
That's
answered?
correct, Councillor Edwards. So there is on the next item, which is questions without notice, a follow-up question from one of those.
We'll deal with those. Now, before we move on from the questions on notice, I would just like to add to the responses that the General Manager has made. And firstly, I thank the General Manager for his responses to the question on notice in relation to the State Grants Commission. Council has engaged with federal and state politicians, the State Grants Commission, and anyone else who would listen about our concerns in relation. Is that me? And anyone else that would listen about our concerns in relation to the methodologies used to determine the federal assistance grant allocation over the past 18 months. We have scrutinised our inputs to the consolidated data collection surveys over the years and have not been able to identify any errors that may have impacted on the base grant application. In recent days, and following some super sleuthing by a councillor who has extensive experience in the federal and state government grant funding space, it has been identified that there may be a problem with how the State Grants Commission has interpreted and applied the base grant principles that the federal government applies for distributing the grant funding across council. Probably the most significant factor is that the State Grants Commission information identifies that it has been over 20 years since the federal government has done a public review of how the State Grants Commission distributes the base grants across Tasmanian councils. So Council, through the Office of the Mayor, will now work with our local federal members of Parliament and other federal government departments to have an urgent review of the principles undertaken that hopefully will result in a much better and welcome outcome for Glamorgan Spring Bay. Thank you. Thank you, General Manager. Agenda item 3.2 is questions without notice.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So there's one question without notice. It is from Robin Moore. The question is, I'm writing to draw your attention to the fact that my first question, so that is the question that's on the agenda that you have seen, asked you to provide the breakdown of planning and community amenities spending as per the State Grants Commission spreadsheet. Similarly, my second question asked you to provide the breakdown of administration spending as per the State's Grant Commission spreadsheet. Response: the spreadsheet is developed by the State's Grant Commission. Council does not compile this data for the State's Grants Commission. We simply provide raw data and the State Grants Commission group it into relevant functions. How they compile this should be a question for the State Grants Commission. We recommend that to gain a better understanding of Council's operating budget for each area, you view the profit and loss statements for each department within the information briefing documents, and a link is provided again for access to that document. It is on our website, as Council would be aware. Thank you.
So, General Manager, as I understand it, the raw data that we provide is through this consolidated data collection surveys that we're asked to do every year.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you. Nothing further, General Manager?
No, that's the only question without notice.
Okay, we'll move on. Agenda item 4 is the planning authorities under Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations 2015. As chairperson, I hereby declare that Council is now acting as a planning authority under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 for Section 4 of the agenda. The recommendation, please, Deputy Mayor.
I'll move that Council now acts as the planning authority at 2:10.
Seconder, please. Councillor McQueenie, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against, carried unanimously. Agenda item 4.1 is representation to exhibition of the draft Tasmanian planning policies. I note we have our planning consultant, Mr. Mick Purvis, with us today. There is a recommendation on page 28. Deputy Mayor, thank you.
I'll move that the Planning Authority endorse the attachment 3 Tasmanian planning policies. Will be representation to exhibition, Glamorgan Spring Bay Council as its submission to the exhibition of the Tasmanian planning policies, and 2, requests the Commission seek an extension of time to the 90-day time frame under section 12F brackets 2 of the Act for submission of the report to the Minister for Planning to enable a proper assessment of the exhibited Tasmanian planning policies, and 3, requests that the Commission holds public hearings into the representations on the TPP under section 12F brackets 1 brackets C of the Act, and 4, requests that the Commission engage with Council and the local government sector to investigate and evaluate issues associated with the implementation and operation of the policies.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Wood?
I had not necessarily a question,
That's
but
fine. A comment?
comment. With the talk of the local government review, my question is, what will happen to these policies if we are consolidated? In other words, amalgamated through the outcome of this review. It's just we're going through all of this. And then if we're all thrown into another basket, what happens to these again?
If I may, General Manager, I'll
Thank-
ask Mr. Purvis to answer that question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Is this on?
Yep.
So if councils are amalgamated through the separate government process, it will be firstly, the regional land use strategy will be reviewed, which can happen independently of council amalgamations, and that will be conducted through the state process. The second one is the relevant council planning schemes will then be reviewed as a result of the regional land use strategy review and update. Has that answered your question?
Yeah, just a further statement. So another cost to everybody.
To start again.
Thank you.
Mr. Purvis, if I may, it strikes me that if we don't offer this representation to the Tasmanian Commission, then we are failing in our duty as a planning authority. Because we really, I'm not asking you to answer that. That's my comment in my section, because I actually have a little statement. If there's no further questions or around this, I have a little bit.
I just had if you would like me to, just before you.
Yes, of course.
I just had a comment to make. I mean, the planning policies haven't been around and haven't been reviewed for a long time. Is that correct?
That's
As
correct.
in 2013 or something, or even before.
We're talking the mid-2000s since the last
Right.
planning policy was done in Tasmania.
Okay, and so it does seem relevant, exactly what Councillor Woods has raised, that wouldn't we wait until after the local government review to reduce a lot of the expense if this thing's been sitting around for that long? It would just seem logical to do that. I can understand, but if there are planning policies happening or changes to them, or they're being developed, I would like to think that GSBC had a contribution to them, but nonetheless, I can still get the point about the timing. It does seem pretty inefficient.
I'm not asking you to comment,
No,
Mr.
no,
Purvis.
no comment required.
Unless you want to.
I can provide an observation if you would like.
Absolutely.
So I started as a planner in 97 when the former amalgamations were only weeks from being done. And since that time, we've never actually had a strategic policy planning framework in this state. You will all, well, many of you will recall the frustrations we've had going through the LPS process and planning scheme amendments because of the lack of policy. It is a separate process, so I would suggest that it is important that we have our say now, regardless of potential amalgamations. Because if we don't do this now, it's unknown when it will actually be addressed.
Okay. Thank you.
So that then, if there are no further questions or comments, that then leads me into the statement that I'd like to make. I'm sorry, Debbie.
Just
you
one.
Sorry, you just.
Sorry,
you-
through
you
you,
have
the
to
general
wave at me.
manager. Yeah, that's all right. Give it a bad up. To Mr. Purvis, would some of this work be carried forward if those reforms went ahead? Would we use the body of some of this work if it's got to be reworked again?
I imagine that the government would, and if you've been monitoring the Planning Commission website, you'll see there's a number of other local government organisations in particular that have made representations with very similar concerns to what's listed in my my submission for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing further? So I'm actually concerned about a post that appeared on social media just recently that described this council as planning activists and was critical of the use of a planning consultant. As a planning authority, and since the inception of the Tasmanian Planning Scheme, we've dealt with developers who in some cases have had to go away and review or amend their proposals, all because the assumptions made in the Tasmanian Planning Scheme are either out of date or have flawed data. The population growth data in the Southern Tasmanian Rural Land Use Strategy for Orford is a particularly good example. I believe as a council, we have a responsibility to protect our unique area, and I fully support the use of a very competent planning consultant to prepare our case. We need to ensure we have taken every available opportunity to ensure the future of Glamorgan Spring Bay under planning provisions and give our communities local representation as well as the opportunity to grow. Now planning has been taken out of the terms of reference for the local government board. We have no idea what planning will look like in the future if we end up in a so-called super council. I, for one, am not prepared to sit back and allow the planning policies to be implemented without professional comment from this planning authority. Thank you. Mr. Purvis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to clarify, before I commence this part of the work for council, I negotiated with the Director of Planning and Development to split this particular task with 2 other clients. So it was done on a resource sharing basis with 1 other council and 1 other professional organisation. So it wasn't full cost to Glamorgan Council. It was split across 3 different clients.
A resource sharing situation, which is what we're being told consistently by the local government board review, should happen. Thank you, Mr. Purvis, very much.
Thank you.
So if there's no further comment or questions, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 4.2 is draft amendment AM 2023-02 Tasmanian Planning Scheme, Glamorgan Spring Bay Council revisions to GSB S3 Louisville Road Specific Area Plan. I note we have Mr. Bonner, our senior planner, in the chamber. There is a recommendation on page 34. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Purvis. You are it again, Mr. Purvis, are you? Sorry, thank you very much. Thanks, General Manager. There is a recommendation on page 34. Councillor Woods, thank you.
I'll move that the planning authority, A, pursuant to section 38 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, support the request for amendment AM 202302 to 1, delete the heading GSB-S3.7.5 energy and water efficiency and insert GSB S3.7.5 solar access, and 2, delete minimal minimise energy and water use from the objective and replace with solar access, and 3, delete A2 P2 and A3 P3 at clause GSB S 3.7.5 energy and water efficiencies, and 4, delete A3 P3 at GSB S 3.8.3 service energies and water efficiency, and insert, do I keep reading?
Just, I think, Madam Mayor, it would be appropriate just to refer to A3 and
A3
P3
and
below.
P3 below, and 5, delete A4 P4 at GSB S 3.8.3 service energy and water efficiency, and B, pursuant to section 40F of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, certifies that AM 2023-02 meets the LPS criteria, and C, instructs that adjoining property owners and occupiers must be notified of the draft planning scheme amendment.
Is there a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Mm.
Councillor Woods, you wish to speak to the motion?
On my out of words at the moment, Mayor, I'll just leave it.
Close debate. Close debate. Deputy,
Yes.
okay, Councillor Woods,
Yes,
sorry.
thank you.
Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak?
Look, just to thank our senior planner for putting the work into this, and I think it's a way forward.
Any other questions? Any comments? Councillor Churchill, please.
Yes, I have some comments. Thank you, Mayor. I don't think I'll be going over my allocated 5 minutes, but I have a little bit here that I want to say.
I'll probably be a little bit lenient today, councillor.
It's okay. I'll do my best. As we all know, this development's been a long time in the making. We're up to pushing 2 decades or somewhere thereabouts now. And I look at the TPS GSBC specific area plan as it is. And among other things, what stands out in this is, to me, the purpose of the plan is, as I say, amongst other things, to provide for a sustainable, high-quality tourism, recreational and residential estate that is developed consistent with the desired future character statements for the 5 precincts and 9 sub-areas that comprise the SAP. To create a major visitor area that will encourage visitors to stay longer in the area. To minimise the environmental footprint of development through energy efficiency, water-sensitive urban design, and reuse of waste and construction materials. We have a look at the local area objective, S3.3.1.1, the golf precinct. A, consists of an international standard woodland golf course to service the visitor as well as the local community, and B, achieve the highest standard in environmental design and management in terms of water usage and treatment, tree preservation, management of native flora and fauna, and enhancement of existing landscapes. In my view, the original SAP, developed many years ago, contained many elements of good planning, including the harvesting of stormwater to be used on a golf course, high standards of environmental design with emphasis on tourism and recreational infrastructure. I support good development and have been driving past this site for many years, wishing for something good to happen and wondering what will happen on this large parcel of land. Beside the highway, there is much beautiful bush that is designated to be open space and reserves. Beyond that, and in other precincts, there has been land clearing and erosion after incomplete excavations. Some of this has resulted in soil washing into the bay and causing continuing concern from community for more than a decade. The amendment presented to the Planning Authority is, in my opinion, a considerable compromise to the original intent of the SAP, and issues we are asked to consider largely involve stormwater management. While I understand the practical considerations being requested in this amendment and concede that changes are needed, I have concerns around the final outcomes of the stormwater management, the impact on environment and neighbouring properties, and the potential impact on councils of the future for increased costs relating to stormwater management. With the long-term demands for water and potential for 605 residential developments, a hotel, and a thirsty golf course, the need to capture available water on the dry East Coast is high, a lost opportunity if we don't get it right. I won't be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Lynn? Before the- No? Any comment, Mr. Purvis? Councillor Churchill didn't have a question, so I'm not asking you to comment if there's nothing to be said.
Just noting that the amendment itself doesn't stop stormwater management directing water towards the golf course. It just changes the mandatory considerations within the planning scheme. Council's other roles outside the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act still provide full discretion for those decisions to be made about how that stormwater might be used in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. If there are no further, Councillor Woods, do you wish to close debate if there's no further questions?
No, thank you, Mayor.
No, thank you. On that basis, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Councillors Churchill and Councillor Young are against. The motion is carried 6-2. Thank you. Under Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedure Regulations 2015, as chairperson, I hereby declare that council is no longer acting as a planning authority under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 for section 4 of the agenda. There is a recommendation on page 36. Councillor Woods, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move that council no longer acts as a planning authority at 2:27 p.m.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Edwards, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Thank you. Agenda item 5 is the financial reports. There is a recommendation on page 37. Sorry, Councillor Young, thank you.
Madam Mayor, I move that council receives and notes the financial reports as attached to this report for the period ending May 2023.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Churchill, thank you. Questions or comments, Councillor Young as the mover, or no? Any other questions? Any other comments in relation to the financial report? No, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion's carried unanimously. Agenda item 6 is the section 24 committees. We have a number of minutes there, varying recommendations. The first one is 6.1, the Tribana Community Hall. The recommendation is on page 41. Yeah. I believe. Sorry, Councillor Young, thank you.
I move that the minutes of the Tribana Community Hall Committee meeting held 2nd May 2023 be received and noted.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Edwards, thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Woods?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to comment that it seems to have quite a healthy bank balance there on page 38.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Krishna Memorial Hall recommendation is on page 44.
I'll move that the minutes of the Vishnu Memorial Hall Committee meeting held on the 7th of March 2023 be received and noted.
Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Wood, Councillor Edwards, thank you. Questions or comments?
Just make a comment.
Councillor
It's
Edwards?
a very generous donation from the Community Health Group. I noticed towards them, which is good to see.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Agenda item 6.3 is the Tribunal Recreation Ground. There is a recommendation on page 46. Councillor Woods, thank you.
Thank you. I move that the minutes of the Tribunal Recreation Ground Advisory Committee held on the 25th of May 2023 be received and noted.
Councillor McQueenie, I'll take that as your second. Thank you. Any questions or comments, Councillor Woods?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to just say on page 44, where it says Councillor Jenny Woods met with Peter Porch, Director of Infrastructure, to discuss repairs and general maintenance to the facility. This afternoon, time permitting, Mr. Porch, myself and Councillor Edwards are going to go up and have a look at. We have got a major problem up there with destruction. Or can't think of the actual word that needs.
Vandalism.
Yeah,
Vandalism.
Wanton vandalism. Yeah, it is a big concern. If I may, can I ask Mr. Porch a question?
Absolutely.
please? It just requires a yes or a nod, really.
I can't see his nod behind the head.
Has the measurements for the timekeeper's box been taken and sorted for the trying to lock that door?
Response through you, Madam Mayor. The contractor's been contacted with regard to it and he's fitting it into his schedule. So I don't know whether he's measured it yet, but he's got it on his list.
Yep, lovely. Thank you very much. No more, nothing further.
Thank you. And Councillor Young.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask a question of either General Manager or Mr. Porch. What would it cost to put a video surveillance up there somewhat along the lines of that which we have at Tribunal Wharf? I know I don't expect an answer now, but it's the sort of thing I think we ought to consider.
And if I may, Councillor Young, Councillor Woods, I believe that's what you're discussing with Mr. Porch this afternoon.
Yeah.
Right. Do we have any idea of the cost at this point, Mr. Porch or General Manager?
At this stage, no. It's certainly it's on the list. We will be pricing it to see what sort of cost that's going to be. I don't imagine it'd be outside of the council's capacity to pay for it, but we'll be looking at it.
Lovely. Thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, I will put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Agenda item 6.4 is the Marine Infrastructure Meeting Committee minutes, and there is a recommendation on page 49. Councillor Woods, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move that the minutes of the Marine Infrastructure Committee held on the 6th of June 2023 be received and noted, and two, that the recommendations contained therein, the appointment of David Goodfellow, Jeff Kennedy, Steve Thompson and Peter Orlick be approved.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Edwards, thank you. Councillor Woods, I understand you are the chair of this.
That's correct.
Would you like to make any comment around?
Yeah, I have got, yes, I have. It was really pleasing to have 4 people apply through the process of getting
Expression of interest.
expressions of interest. Thank you. Yeah. All worthy of being accepted onto the committee. They all bring something new, because you always need to have a turnover of people on committees just to bring new light and new eyes. And as per agenda item 5, the discussion on the marina fees and charges at the marina. through our budget deliberations, we did inform council of the committee's reluctance to have further increase in marina fees, considering, and just to name a couple, the 2 consecutive years of 15% increase, which was a huge hit for the berth holders, and the lack of amenities on the eastern side of the condition of that area. I believe with what's coming up further in the agenda that the committee themselves will be grateful. And I thank the council for that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for councillor Woods in relation to the marine infrastructure? If there is nothing further, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Agenda item 7.1 is, or 7 is the information report. 7.1 is our Director Works and Infrastructures, very comprehensive usual report that he does. There is a recommendation on page 55. Councillor Young.
I move that council notes the information.
I have a seconder, please. Councillor Churchill, thank you. Questions, Councillor Young, any questions for Mr. Paul?
Well, I haven't got, well, I suppose I have. The very pretty photograph on page 54. Is that a perpendicular shot, or are those items of machinery somehow suspended from thin air?
It's a particularly good observation, Councillor Young. Mr. Porch, please.
Madam Mayor, it's certainly a trick of photography. It's mirrors and lights. But that is quite, if you've been on Wailangta Road and you know where those orange barriers are, that's a significant depth at which they're working down the bank at about 35 metres or something down the embankment. So it's quite a steep incline, but it doesn't quite present as the photo suggests.
Thank you, Mr. Porch. I'd hate them to suffer the sort of problems that the odd bulldozer driver suffers when moving iron ore up at the west coast of Australia. They slide into the morass and it all descends upon them. This looks as if it might happen here.
Thank you for that insight, Councillor Young. Councillor McQueenie.
I may, Mayor, through you to either the General Manager or the Director of Planning. Just in terms of on page 54 of the discussion of Bicheno Gulch and the progress of the DA.
Which is this in Mr. Porch's report?
Just here
Okay.
on 54.
Thank you.
Update on what timeframes may be associated with parks and wildlife.
General Manager, thank you.
Madam Mayor, that's quite a timely question because we did get an update, we did get a response to the information that we have provided to Parks and Wildlife on this project. And earlier on this morning, I did circulate that to the councillors. You may not have seen it yet, but I did circulate. So basically what Parks and Wildlife are requiring still is a whole lot more investigation work and information provided by council. I might add for the public record that it is quite frustrating in terms of major project progress in dealing with and sometimes and that's an opinion voiced by other general managers of councils in Tasmania.
General Manager, I could accept that the state government has been caught up with red tape. I don't believe it.
Councillor Young, okay. Councillor Woods, then Councillor Churchill, please.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions within the report. On page 51, stormwater drainage. So the east end of East Shelley Road stormwater extension to foreshore at Luther Point to mitigate property flooding, awaiting cultural permit. So was there any damage done at this with the rain event that we had on Friday there?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's just a continuation of the same where water runs down through a person's property. For those who don't know, there was a pit placed at the end of the road some years ago, and I'm sure at the time it was intended to extend that out through to to disperse water at the coast edge. It's only about 30 metres or something like that, and there are some heritage issues in the area. We've got a heritage report. We've been through that process, and it's yet to be assessed. So a couple of other questions were asked. We've got to provide that information. We'll provide that. Then that will go to their next meeting and
Mhm.
continue the process.
Thank you. There's on page 52, parks, playgrounds, reserves, the second point, the two tree risk assessments completed. Were they the trees that I requested that council have a look at? The one at corner of Jetty Road in Shelley Beach, and the other ones at Riverside Drive?
Without, I haven't got additional detail on
Yeah,
that to be able to
okay.
tell you.
Thank you. And again, a bit more red tape question here. Underneath on page 54, Rebben Road landslide rehabilitation, design in progress, natural values report being generated to meet parks requirements. Arrangements for a detour being investigated as roadworks will require. Why on earth do we have to have a natural values report on a bit of road that was already there?
Through you,
And
You're
we
allowed to
and we are replacing it.
And Mr. Porch, if I may, you're allowed to be completely and utterly honest in relation to this.
I should still be circumspect. The road itself is not in the road reserve, but it goes through a section of Parks land. In addition, the works need to take place outside of what would have been the road reserve had the road been in the road reserve. So there are some processes we have to work our way through, which we are doing.
No, expand on that one.
Absolutely.
Is this at a time cost, or is it at a monetary cost?
There's always a cost associated with generating reports and things like that, because you've got to have the right people doing the reports with the right accreditation. So there is a cost whenever there's a report has to be generated. With respect to this one, I don't think there are too many issues that are going to hold it up. I expect to be able to go to tender with this project in early July and have a report. I don't know that I'll get a report back to council by the July meeting, but we're very close to having all the documentation right to go to tender.
So can I ask again another question, if I may? I'm not trying to debate, but I'm asking, how long is it since this road slipped away?
This would be September last year.
Right.
So if we considered Wailangta, that's probably about 12 months more. If we considered Old Coach Road, that would have been October last year. And if we considered Sand River Road, that would have been probably 6 months more than that as well. So some of these are related to budget funding. Certainly Rebben Road didn't qualify for state government funding under their emergency provisions. So it's a matter of cost. So where's the cost going to come from? So we've identified a funding source through the grants process, other grants process, and we're able to continue on with that. With Wailangta, it was the document development process took a bit longer. With Sand River Road, it was a matter of again getting funding to be able to do it. Council put up some funds, but we needed additional funds to be able to progress with that, which we've been able to secure through Defence. And Old Coach Road is funded under the emergency management arrangements from the state government, and that also is very close to having construction documentation ready to go early in the new financial year. That one I believe we can do with our internal resources.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, councillor Woods. That's it. I believe councillor Churchill, no, I believe councillor Churchill was next and then councillor Edwards.
That's okay. Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make the comment that it's great to see that the Swansea Main Street project is drawing into the final stages, and to thank especially the business community of Swansea for the inconvenience while this has all been happening. But I'm sure that in the longer term, that inconvenience will pay back well. So yes, thanks for letting us know that that's drawing to a close. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Edwards.
To Director Porch, the arrangements for a detour have been investigated. Where are we up to with that?
Okay, so through you, Madam Mayor, a good result with that. We've been in contact with the landowners behind the properties that align the road. There is, indeed, we have the properties behind the properties. So there is, fortunately, there are two unformed road accesses, one below the properties, one above the properties, that will enable a detour to be implemented that does, well, other than having cars going behind their properties, that won't inconvenience those people who directly front Rebben Road.
That's a very good outcome, Director Porch. Well, good.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, Mr. Porch? I just have one thing that I would like to acknowledge, and that is the rapid response to the request from Tribunna Post Office for 30-minute parking signage outside that post office. They were having numerous problems with RVs and the bigger tourist vehicles parking there for a very long time. And some of our less mobile residents were finding it difficult to go to the post office. So we've extended that 30-minute parking with the help of Mr. Porch from the pharmacy through to Tribunna Post Office, which is, I think, working quite well. I know that the post office staff have been very, very grateful for what council achieved. I thank you for that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So on that basis, if there is nothing further, I'll put the motion. Council receives the information. Those against? Carried. Thank you. Agenda item 7.2 is the community survey outcome. There is a recommendation on page 59. Councillor Edwards, thank you.
I'd like to move that the council acknowledges the high level of public participation in the survey and receives and notes the report on the community consultation. Council will use the information to inform the budget priorities for 23-24, its communication methodology and opportunities for improvement in service delivery.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Churchill, thank you. Councillor Edwards, do you wish to comment? No. Councillor Churchill, do you wish to comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to say that I think that there can be some really good uses for this. There's some should be over time a lot of assistance from this in our decision making. Keeps us more informed with what community wants, and I think this is it's fantastic to have it happen, and I believe we'll plan to continue to repeat this.
Are there any other questions or comments? General Manager, I just have one question. I'm not expecting you to have the answer, although it might be a simple one. We've highlighted 3 different age groups: 65 plus, 55 to 64, 45 to 54. We're often accused of not engaging with that, say, 18 to 45 age bracket. Is it a reasonable assumption on my part that the 112 odd other surveys that we received may have come from that age bracket, or were they?
Madam Mayor, it certainly is a reasonable assumption because, as council may be aware, we did adopt a targeted approach at our schools to meet that age group and actually to hear from them directly. And as we reported in the results, a fair percentage of our respondents were in that under 20 age bracket,
Sure.
which is very pleasing to see.
We are often accused of not engaging with that, I would say 18 to 35 age group. So it would be really good if we could continue that, I think. There's nothing further. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 8.1 is the budget estimates and rates resolution. There is a recommendation on page 66. Councillor Churchill.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council 1 approve the Glamorgan Spring Bay Council 2023-24 budget estimates as set out in attachment 1, consisting of profit and loss statement, statement of financial position, cash flow statement, capital works detail and loan summary. 2, adopt the rates resolution for 2023-24 as set out in attachment 2. And 3, note that the long-term financial management plan financial modelling for the next 10 years was reviewed during the development of the 2023-24 budget and shall be reviewed further to confirm strategic targets ahead of finalisation of the 2024-25 budget.
Thank you, Councillor Churchill. Do I have a seconder? Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Woods, thank you. Councillor Churchill, protocol would dictate that I should give you the opportunity to speak first, but I wonder if you would indulge me as the chair to make some opening remarks.
Certainly, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. The budget presented today is the result of robust, sorry, I think it might be my laptop that's doing it. I'm very sorry. The budget presented today is the result of robust discussions during our budget sessions or individually with staff over the past several weeks leading into months. It has been a collaborative coming together of minds that have had the best interests of the community at heart, especially in the light of CPI running at just under 7% and the never-ending cost of living pressures we're all facing. One of the issues identified in the budget is the proposed reduction in mowing service that has raised concerns in the elected member group and the broader community. I don't think it's clear in the agenda papers that this service reduction will be undertaken as part of a one-year trial. It will be subjected to intense scrutiny by the Director of Works and Infrastructure through the number of complaints received and or requests for assistance from our less abled community members or reports from our outside work staff. Council has a robust complaints logging system that will inform staff as we go forward. The community can be assured that the matter will be reviewed once we have sufficient data to analyse. In terms of the less abled members that may be able to deal with it, I understand that there may be opportunities for independent grant funding to assist those people that can be investigated at the time of any review that we do. On a more positive note, and in relation to the budget, is the recommended increase in rates. Council and the community will remember that the long-term financial management plan forecasts a 12.5% increase in this coming financial year. This budget recommends an average increase of 9%. It is very close to the local government rate increase index of 8.5% and approximately 2% above CPI. Coupled with this is a budget that will see our asset renewal move to 100% in accordance with the various asset renewal plans that we have. It is a move towards ensuring our assets are removed. It is a move towards ensuring our assets are renewed within their predicted lifespan. Council recognises that cost of living pressures are affecting everyone, including those sitting in this chamber, and we have been mindful of that when setting this budget and the rates resolution. I believe it is a responsible budget in the current economic climate for the future sustainability of this council. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Churchill. Do you wish to speak to your motion?
Thank you. And yeah, thank you for that introduction. I no doubt had there'll be some crossover in what I have to say here also, but I think some of these things are worth emphasising anyway. Yeah, it was a very good introduction and it clarified quite a few things that we need to know. So I won't need to do that any further. The budget process has been comprehensive. The council staff have spent an inordinate amount of time. There you go. I can't even pronounce the word inordinate amount of time presenting options and changing the modelling at the request of councillors to get the best outcome available while balancing the funding available with the provision of services expected by our residents and ratepayers. Guided by the long-term financial management plan and the asset management plans, and I quote from the officer's report, enabled from continuous and prudent asset assessment for value with every cost incurred and review of all available income options, end of quote. I believe we have a recommendation, now a motion, that is a good compromise and broadly in line with the long-term financial management plan. The external members of Council's audit panel have made comment on a draft budget. In those comments, a recommendation that the target of 80% renewal is a long-term risk, increasing the backlog of renewal that already sits at over $9 million. This budget has, having heard the concerns of the audit panel, accommodated 100% renewal, which means council is now on course to maintain assets as they are now. Importantly, there is no allowance to address the $9 million backlog of renewal needed, most of which is roads and stormwater assets. But hopefully this will be addressed over time and in future budgets. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
Madam Mayor, you mentioned the average. I did some calculations when I read this. And lawyers are not very good at calculations, but on a property worth $400,000, the general rate increase will be approximately only 6.5%, nowhere near 9%. And that operates because there is a lump sum levy in addition to the assessed annual value tax, which is the thing that's being increased. So those people whose properties are worth a substantial amount more than $400,000, some of them will pay over 6.5%. Some might get up to 9%, but only a very few. But for the bottom end of the society, those that have houses that are not all that valuable, many of them will only pay a 6.5% increase.
Councillor Young, can I just clarify that with the General Manager? My understanding was that, or maybe Ms. Blaine, it was around for that 450,000 cohort was around 8.5%. Is that reasonable, Ms. Blaine? Sorry.
Yes, but it is a group. It's not.
It is a group. Yes, I understand that.
So there's variation within that group. So there's higher, there's lower, and averages within that.
But my statement that an average increase of 9% across all properties is a reasonable figure.
It's on the high side. It will be no more than that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Young. Any other questions, Councillor Edwards?
Yeah, with the if there's a reduction in the mowing, a few very valid points which have come to my attention is if somebody flicks up a rock and smashes a window, who's responsible when they're mowing somebody else's land? If there's a fire abatement notice because they say stuff it, it's going to let it grow up, who's responsible? Will there be green waste charges at the tip? The review, is that going to be ongoing and is set in concrete? Just so it's not going to be, it's gone. So once it's gone, it very rarely comes back.
General Manager?
I can comment on a couple of those. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this council did commit to a 12-month review. I think that was quite clear, and that's what we've implemented here. And as the mayor had said in her opening, that is going to be monitored very closely. And we will, through that process, also engage with or get to know about properties and owners of these nature strips that may not be able to maintain or mow the nature strips as per the level of service that we have been providing. So there are avenues for them that we will work with those people in terms of assistance. The fire abatement, the fire notices, I cannot agree with the fact that there would be fire issues in an urban environment on a nature strip. But again, if there was, council as a notification authority would take steps to deal with that as well, if it was deemed a fire risk, not for any other reason. And sorry, what was the other issue you raised?
Green waste charges, and if they flick a rock, so they're mowing the nature strip.
Oh, yeah, so
the
nature strip, so there's no liability on council as per every other municipality in the country in terms of people mowing their nature strips.
No, but I mean liability on the people who are now mowing the council's nature strip.
Well, there'd be no liability on them either because it's civil insurance.
Okay, so they can't get done. Whatever happens, if they flick up a rock and hit a kid in the eye, they're in the clear.
It might be
The
something.
homeowner's in the clear.
I wouldn't say they're in the clear, but I'm saying there's no responsibility or legal ramifications for council.
No, I'm saying there's a responsibility or legal ramification on the ratepayer who's mowing the council's property.
I would expect that the ratepayer would have their own insurance.
On
In
to
that
mow
regard.
somebody else's land.
Yes,
Ew. That's a big hurdle, I would have thought.
General Manager, perhaps?
Point of order,
Yes, I
Madam
was,
Mayor.
yes, if I may, Councillor Young, I was just going to suggest to the General Manager that I take Councillor Edwards' concern around this, but it might need some clarification, General Manager, that you can
Yep.
provide to Councillor Young, because there are some questions from one of our ratepayers that goes to the heart of Councillor Edwards' questions as well. So I think if we could look at those after the meeting and provide Councillor Edwards with a formal response. Would that be, and the ratepayer that has raised the issues as well.
I think, Madam Mayor, that's quite appropriate. I don't have it with me, but I think we actually have a legal opinion on this as well that I can provide.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, that would be great. Councillor McQueen.
Yeah, not a question, but some comments if I can.
Sure.
And what you, Mayor, didn't cover, you did for most of Councillor Churchill for what I was going to say. So bear with me. I too wanted to acknowledge the amount of time and effort that went into this, and not only the work of the council management, but also the robust discussion that happened in the room too. I suspect that not one of us probably feels that it's exactly the budget if we were the decision makers that came forward. And this is particularly, I guess, in light of the mowing. So two things I'd like to say about that. One is that in so much as there will be people who may not appreciate that, we have decided in this budget not to do a number of things. For instance, we've decided not to put additional money into creating the opportunity for young children and adults to be able to do a wee at Spring Beach, one of our iconic ones if they've got a disability. So there are many things and many worthy and competing things that could have gone ahead. So whilst there are things that this budget encompasses like mowing, there are other things we've decided also equally not to provide as a council or resource. One thing in the last 24 hours that I have done some research on is the opportunity for people who have a level of incapacity or disability to actually be able to get some assistance for mowing. There is, in fact, and if you'll indulge me, there's a Commonwealth funded program called Community Home Support Program. So if people think of aged care. We all know about the aged care facilities, and a number of you have probably heard about aged care packages that you can have in your home. This is a lower level of care. One of the things that can be provided is mowing or gardening for folk who qualify. The capacity to access that service is via an independent assessment by a health group, ultimately My Aged Care and the aged care assessment team. So the eligibility for that is tested by someone quite outside council. There's also the opportunity, and I'm waiting to hear back from the area, that councils, as in any level of government, can even be a provider for that. So in terms of tracking those that may need assistance for incapacity or inability to mow, that can commence tomorrow for people who may wish to do that. There's an issue at the moment with providers to this area, but via subcontracting Mayshore, there are 2 people in Hobart who actually can be the vehicles for providing this. So at the moment, they service Mayshore, and there's people who are eligible for that from Swansea down to Buckland. The Bicheno service has been suspended because of the level of people, but it provides an opportunity for someone in Bicheno to start fulfilling that role. So this, I think, is important to put in the trial, and another comfort that people are not going to be abandoned if they are unable to do it, notwithstanding insurance or otherwise. Just if I completely concur too with what Councillor Churchill was saying. We can't ignore the inconvenient truth. While we've been able to minimise rates now, we have to figure out, I think, responsibly a pathway forward for the near 10 million backlog. I think that's probably it. The rest has been covered off.
Thank you.
Thank
Madam
you.
Mayor, can I add to that? It's gone
Councillor
not only
McQueenie.
as south as Buckland, but it's also gone to Earlham Road, because the gentlemen who live in the premise now occupied by Darren Smith from this office used to have assistance, and all his lawns were mowed by someone organised via Mayshore, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Any other questions in relation to the budget? Councillor Lark.
I just wonder whether the mowing that Councillor McQueenie was talking about from Mayshore or a private provider actually applies on council-owned property.
Councillor Lark, I'm a little bit. I appreciate the information that Councillor McQueenie has provided here. It is introducing another level of information into the budget discussions, and I certainly don't want to not answer you. However, I think it is something that can be investigated by council as part of any review that comes. And as Councillor McQueenie has quite rightly identified, it can happen from day one, effectively. So I think that's all things that need to be, for want of a better term, sorted out at the time when it's identified.
On that basis, I'll return to, before I deviated.
Sure.
First of all, I'd like to say that the work done by the council staff in presenting this budget has been fantastic and much appreciated. However, given that the mowing was put in there, this concept was first discussed back in January. The councillors back then asked for community consultation, impact assessment on ratepayers, insurance risk and liabilities for ratepayers while mowing council land, details on mowing staff and contractors' continual employment, service levels expected by council for the mowing frequency and standards, and options for alternative financing of retaining the mowing. Months of partial responses have seen this proposal buried in a subparagraph, page 62 out of a 79-page document, with another 300 pages in agenda. I stood for transparency, consultation and governance, and in my mind, I must vote against the budget as it was contained within that budget, and I don't believe we've assessed that on the ratepayers correctly.
General Manager, is this, I hear what Councillor Luck's saying, and I certainly had questions back in January, which with everything that's gone on, I didn't go back and have a look at whether I actually received responses to my questions. is it reasonable for me to assume that that's why we're now looking at this as a one-year trial? Because we didn't go through that consultation process, or?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think that was part of the discussion we had at the workshop when the one-year trial was first spoken about and suggested. I think under the circumstances with Glamorgan Spring Bay Council and the size that we are and the resources that we have at our disposal, and the ongoing questioning of our administration costs, we have this council has gone over and above in terms of discussing the mowing specifically, and I do recall a report was provided to council a lot earlier than, I can't remember the exact date, but the director of Works and Infrastructure did provide a report on the mowing specifically to put it, if you like, front and foremost in councillors' minds, with a view that obviously it was one of the levers, the many levers that we have discussed, with a view that that would be a lever that we'd be talking about when we undertook our budget deliberations.
I would say from that point of view that it hasn't been tested by being put in front of the elected members. So as a policy, be it a trial, I feel that it should have been put as a vote to the elected members before it was included in this budget deliberation. And because it's in the deliberation now and hasn't been tested, we haven't had a chance to assess our community feedback. So I'm in an awkward position of either accepting the mowing or voting down a valid budget. Sorry, that's my opinion.
Councillor Woods?
Anyone else?
Oh, Councillor Churchill? No, if you.
I'll close.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So given the conversations, and I certainly concur with all councillors around the table, it's a great debate, which is around the table, and it's got to be debated. If we sit here and just vote, not vote, we would be questioned as to what we're doing here. So I'm very happy for the debate. I'm wondering though, given the sensitivity and the angst that the mowing has caused not only to councillors but to people, to ratepayers, if there can be an amendment to, if I can put an amendment to the recommendation or the motion, and that is just to add a point, and I'll just read it out before, it might need to be tweaked. I haven't got it written up, Jazz, but I can certainly throw it to you in a minute. And it is number 4. Give an undertaking to the ratepayers that the mowing of the grass verges throughout the municipality that have been removed will be reviewed throughout the year, throughout the 2023-24 year, and that the community will be consulted re the findings. Is that's similar to what you were talking about? With regards to in your statement at the beginning there, Mayor, and I think it will give the community, the ratepayers, some assurance, and it's actually documented. So we have to do it. And we didn't do community consultation with regards to this, but this is sort of a.
Councillor Woods, if you'd like to test that on the floor of the chamber by moving an amendment, which would be the recommendation plus your number 4, we'll see if we get a seconder and we can deal with it on the floor of the chamber.
Can I add something which they want to include in the same amendment?
Not until we get an amended motion.
Yeah.
Councillor Edwards.
The amending the amendment.
So Councillor Woods.
So I'll move an amendment.
Yeah, amendment.
Give an undertaking.
No, sorry, Councillor Woods, sorry, for an amended motion, I need the full motion plus your number 4, please.
Okay, so amended motion. 1, approve the Glamorgan Spring Bay Council 2023-24 budget estimates as set out in attachment 1, consisting of profit and loss statements, statement of financial position, cash flow statements, capital works detail, and loan summary. 2, adopt the rates resolution for 2023-24 as set out in attachment 2. 3, note that the long-term financial management plan financial modelling for the next 10 years was reviewed during the development of the 2023-24 budget and shall be reviewed further to confirm strategic targets ahead of finalisation of the 2024-25 budget. And 4, give an undertaking to ratepayers that the mowing of grass verges throughout the municipality that have been removed. Are you catching up with me, Jazz? Yeah. Removed will be reviewed. Throughout the 2023-24 year. Yes. No.
Yes. Yes, yes.
And that the community will be consulted regarding the findings.
Yeah, can I just ask for a seconder to that amended motion? Councillor McQueenie, thank you. General Manager, you had a question for Councillor Woods?
Yeah, just a question for Councillor Woods, just in terms of the second part of that amended motion. The first part makes sense. The second part, in terms of the consultation, what is the councillor's expectation of what that consultation would be?
Well, I would suggest it would be within the review of what the review findings and letting the community know the review findings.
So if we, through you, Madam Mayor,
Yes.
our intent would be through monitoring throughout the year would be by the same way we provide information in the director's report, we would be reporting on the mowing. Is that what?
Yes, and also councillors, receiving from the complaints that are going to come forward with regards to, the non-mowing.
Yes.
We need to see, the council needs to see, councillors, I should say, not that we can do anything about it as such, because it's not in our remit to respond to the complaints, that is, but to see the complaints, to know, what's taking place out there.
So, Councillor Woods, as I understand what you're saying, is that you're seeking some transparency around the complaints
Yes.
process in relation to this, to be conveyed to the community, to give them some comfort that we are in fact reviewing it, and that that review will inform our decisions at the end of next year for the 24-25 budget.
Yes.
Have I summed that up reasonably well, Councillor Woods?
Mayor, yes.
Right. Do I have any other questions?
Up there. Oh, you're right.
Everyone's looking here.
My death hands.
Did we get a second? Yes.
Yes.
So are there any questions or comments in relation to the amended motion?
No.
That's Councillor
To,
Luck.
to add to the amendment, we need to call another amendment.
Yeah.
If I want to add to that amendment, we have to pass it first and then add a subsequent amendment.
That's what I just got told.
Would you like to explain it to me, Councillor Luck, because I'm a little bit lost in this at the moment. We can only have
The-
2 amendments on the floor at any time, and it becomes then very much a
What
governance.
I'm asking is whether the amendment that Councillor Woods has suggested can have extra clauses added to it. No.
Not at this point, unless there is unless you have another amendment. And under meeting procedures, I'm going to look to Mr. Woodward for this, or to the General Manager. I think we can only have one amended
Yeah.
motion on the floor, given that it is to do with the rates resolution. Would that be reasonable?
You need to vote through you, man. You need to vote for this.
Absolutely, I understand that. I understand.
If there's another one.
Right, thank you.
Potentially, sorry, I was just going to ask, is it possible to hear what
Yeah,
your thoughts are on potential amendment before?
that's what I
Votes
wanted to do
made.
too, just
We
No, it's not a-
put the
Sorry.
thought out.
Through you, Mayor, so you'll need to vote whether you accept this as the amended motion
Yes.
before debate first.
Yeah.
And so if that's then voted, before you vote for the final approval, you could then put another amended motion. forward. So I suggest that you vote.
Madam Mayor, I move that
No,
the
no, no,
amendment to the
no,
motion
no.
be accepted for the purposes of discussion.
No, we can't, I'm sorry, councillor Young, I don't believe I can do that. I think I have to put the amended motion by councillor. Now, did we get a seconder for that one?
Yes.
Yep.
We did. Thank you,
McQueenie, yep.
Councillor McQueenie, thank you. If there's no further questions or comments, councillor Churchill, did you have a question on the amended motion? Because I know the process, as I understand it, is that I, as the chair, is that I will need to put the amended motion to the floor to test it. If the amended motion is carried, it then becomes the substantive motion.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'll
Which
just
is up
hold
for
on.
discussion,
Pardon?
which is then up for discussion.
Yes, yes,
that
councillor
once,
Duff.
once it's accepted, it can be up for discussion. Yes,
Yes, Madam Mayor, and that's,
Are we voting on the rates resolution here or are we
Yes.
voting on the,
yeah,
so we are,
yeah. So
Voting
this
on
is
the
adopting
rates
the rates
resolution.
resolution
Yeah.
inside this. So the councillor Woods has moved an amended motion, which is the recommendation on page 66 with the inclusion of a part 4. I will put the motion, the amended motion. So all those in favour,
What we're doing, we're voting for
the
the amended motion to become,
the
the motion.
substantive motion,
Yeah.
that's
So we're
right.
not voting on the
No.
substantive.
Allow the
No.
amendment, nothing further.
Those against. Councillor Churchill is against. So we have the amended motion accepted. In terms of meeting procedures now, there can be a discussion on the amended motion
first of
or.
all, on the amended motion, Madam Mayor,
Sorry,
a discussion on the amended motion.
right,
Yep.
thank you. I understand. Why is it doing this? It hates me, you know.
Sorry.
Okay. So my understanding has always been, and I need some clarification around this, is that an amended motion is put, once it is accepted, it becomes the substantive motion with no further discussion.
Except that the council, Madam Mayor, can put another motion up.
Right now, there can be another amendment.
Correct. Is it?
But we can't
With
make a
great
comment.
respect and
Councillor Lutz, point.
with great respect, councillors, and at the risk of sounding flippant, it's pretty much clear as mud right now,
But-
General Manager.
Also with respect,
Because my understanding of it, as I said, has always been that as soon as the amended motion is accepted, it immediately becomes the substantive
It
motion.
is a substantive motion, absolutely.
It is now.
Yes.
So do I put that, or do councillors have the opportunity to move another amendment
Through you, Madam Mayor, you have to put that motion.
as the substantive motion?
Correct.
Once that's done, it's finalised.
do we debate?
Someone's,
Yeah.
I think it's me. It might be councillor McQueenie. with
Oh, sorry.
Your
Think it was-
computer, councillor McQueenie, because I think it's my computer that's doing it as well. I'm sorry about that.
The amended one, and we get to vote.
Didn't we just do that?
I've already put the motion forward to accept the amendment, which has been accepted.
So now, Madam Mayor, there's debate on the amended motion.
Debate on the amended motion. Okay.
Which Jenny moved.
Yeah.
So may I
Yeah,
open debate?
so now,
Yes, so councillor Woods, do you wish to speak to that motion now?
look, just given the angst that this has caused
Mm.
around the table within our budget deliberations and out in the community, I think it needs to be a documented motion so that we are held accountable to what what is being suggested in your introduction and all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
So councillor Luck, you wanted to make some comments around this, so.
What I was hoping to do was add to councillor Wood's statement number 4 and just expand that out a little bit so that the community has got confidence in what they're being told. And part of that was councillor Woods has mentioned the community consultation. I'm happy with that part. An impact assessment on ratepayers, I would like to see. And definitely insurance risk and liabilities for ratepayers while mowing council land needs to be addressed formally and properly, so that people doing it have the details for it. The details I'd ask for on mowing staff and contractor employment that's an in-house item. The service levels expected by council of mowing frequency and standards also needs to be included.
Can I suggest that all the things you've raised would sit inside any review that we do in the 2023-24 year? And I think all we will do is perhaps confuse the issue of this reduce our rates resolution, which does have a legislative requirement around how it's actually written. So I'm a little bit concerned about adding more to it, councillor Luck, from a governance perspective and a legislative perspective. But I'm by no means suggesting that you shouldn't move an amendment. Just that's my view in this, that we will do our review would include the things that's been discussed here today, I think. Would that be reasonable, councillor Ojo?
It would, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Edwards, would you like to make a comment, and I'll come back to you, councillor Luck?
I am very great to have a review in 12 months' time, but that does not address the fact of indemnity to somebody. So if somebody goes out when this is passed, I've picked up a rock and thrown it probably 40 metres and hit my son in the face. Bloody nearly knocked half his teeth out. So I'm very aware of what can happen. Now, if somebody is attempting to do the right thing, to mow the nature strip, which is not their land, and they knock somebody's teeth out, who gets the bill?
I think.
And 12-month review, it could be too late, because this could happen the day after this comes in.
Councillor Edwards, I don't think anyone is suggesting a review in 12 months' time. Certainly I'm not. I'm suggesting that this will be a continual review, if you like. And the staff are now very well aware of the community and elected members' concerns around it. So I'm just wondering what the value would be in adding to.
Well, can I add that if the review comes back and says hard luck, you're liable, there's going to be a lot of annoyed ratepayers. As the GM sort of alluded to, that the council were covered, but the ratepayer wasn't.
Through you, Madam Mayor, a couple of things. First thing is we don't intend to come to do a monitoring and then only come and report to council or the community after 12 months. There's going to be an ongoing monthly report that'll be included, as I said, in the director's information report, similar to what you got here today, specifically around mowing. And that'll include customer requests, customer complaints, etc., etc. We'd even be able to break that down into areas, how many we get in Tribun and how many get in Swansea. On the issue of insurance, as I've said to you, I haven't got the information to hand, but every single council in Australia that I'm aware of is in the exact same position. So I'm sure there is a general position and acceptance around this. Otherwise, all of those councils wouldn't be doing it.
Well, sadly, that gives me no comfort at all. That's a very earth statement.
That's all I can. I'm not an insurance expert. That's the advice I can provide. Now,
I just clarify. I thought that there had been a commitment already to come back with what advice that you'll find.
yes.
So that doesn't have to wait for a review. That will be available.
It should be upfront.
But if we've passed it and the advice comes back that the ratepayer is liable, it's a bit late, isn't it?
And can I also make the point that I think I'm right in thinking that we've discussed having a strategic review of the strategic plan
Yes.
in this next year. And I would assume that the community are going to be consulted on things that are important to the community. Whether it's mowing, whether it's disability, whether it's, you know, whatever, that this can also, that prioritising will also give us an indication of whether it is the most important things that people wish to have happening too into the future. Not us deciding, but them too.
There's been
So
no
in
consultation.
terms
We
of-
haven't
if I
asked
may,
the community.
Councillor Young, if I may, I
This
think
is
the
issue
general
that we
manager
are.
has already given a commitment to give us the
Yeah.
advice around
Yeah.
particularly the responses to the ratepayers questions that we all received just recently around this very matter that I think is particularly important, not for him and for council to be. Perhaps we could put some statement on our website around it as well to give some comfort. Councillor Young.
I was going to suggest, Madam Mayor, when we get to the extra item 8 on the agenda, that we get our underwriters to include an indemnity to any ratepayer that's sued because of something they do whilst mowing any lawn on council property. That could be included if it's in the insurance policy under the Insurance Contract Act, and I know I'm not a qualified expert these days, but if you're named in the insurance contract as a person that gets a benefit, you can enforce it. And in the very rare circumstance that does happen, and someone does get sued, if they make a claim, and if there's a claim made against them because a rock hit someone, if it comes to council, we can notify the underwriter, and the underwriter will take it off our hands and we can forget about it.
Councillor
Happy
Young, it
with that.
would seem to me that the number of councils that don't do this service around the country, there must be some precedence with insurance, within insurance anyway.
Well, I hope you're right.
Yeah, exactly.
Councillor Churchill.
Just a couple of things. I'm sure there's a lot of similarities between mowing the lawn and driving your car across that same area of ground, which happens all the time. People tend to drive in and out of their driveways. Perhaps they can run over a pedestrian on that same land. I'm sure that insurance is considered enough these days to cover those issues. And as the General Manager has said, he will be bringing that information. We have already a very robust complaints logging system. As we all know, we see the reports from our director, Mr. Porch, every month, and you can see that that reporting system is working very well because those complaints are all logged. They're all presented us to in a format that we can all see and understand quite simply, so that that system is already in place. I don't disagree with the item that that Councillor Woods has added to this motion. I don't have a major drama about it. I just think that it's an addition to what is already there and operating, and you know, I'm fine with that. But I think most of our issues are covered pretty well here, and I feel very comfortable. Well, I felt comfortable with the original recommendation, or I wouldn't have put it. I feel quite comfortable with this additional piece of transparency, if you like, that I think is really what I'm assuming this, that is what Councillor Woods is looking for. But don't ignore the reports behind all of this material that we're looking at. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, okay, I haven't got a whole lot to say, but I certainly value councillor Luck and councillor Edwards' comments, and it's interesting. We just spent about the last half an hour talking about mowing. And also we're in our budget discussions, and as Councillor McQueenie said, it's difficult. We don't get everything we want. I am a little bit disappointed we didn't have these questions answered previously. I think they were asked often enough and we actually didn't get the answers we needed, but that's a comment rather than a criticism. One thing I would be interested in that side of it is actually seeing the actual monetary value. Do we save $300,000? That will be of interest to me at the end of the year. Probably one comment is that hasn't come up is the uncommitted cash amount. We'll have an amount of about $300,000 at the end of this financial year in uncommitted cash. It's been called uncommitted cash. It's been called a surplus. It's been called a buffer. It's if we need it, if there's an emergency. We're looking to take that amount up to 1.4 in the vicinity of $1.4 million at the end of the 23-24 financial year. I have a few concerns about that because most of the money we're raising this year, it's in the vicinity of, in a cash value of around, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's around $800,000, which is, to me, seems to be going to uncommitted cash. And I understand that it's good for a business to have a buffer. I'm concerned how we use that buffer and what that buffer gets used for. It's been mentioned already that we could pay some loans or smaller loans off with it, but I thought it was for emergencies. Is it for a catastrophe? If it's a tsunami or an earthquake, it's federal state funding we're going to use. I just can't quite figure out what we need to use it for. And I understand we should have an amount there, but our long-term financial plan gets it up over $3 million. And I'm just not sure that's good use of ratepayers' money. We talk about it being a buffer for our business. Our business is an entity that can increase, that's got a guaranteed income via rates that we can increase anytime we want to. So I don't see that as comparing it to a regular business. But anyway, I've raised those concerns numerous times, and we're still down that path, and that's fine because we're a collective and that's what we agree on. So it's been very interesting listening to all the other councillors' comments. And it is always hard with this budget debate to not be compromised on what you think you should be doing.
Sorry, General Manager, I think you understand you want to say something, but it has just occurred to me that we probably need to adjourn in accordance with the meeting procedures because motions to amend motions cannot be moved or seconded by someone who moved or seconded the original motion. And I believe we're in that situation right now. And so I am a little bit concerned about the meeting procedures and the process, particularly given that this motion deals with our rates resolution. And the rates resolution, the wording, everything in the rates resolution is a legislative process. So as chair of the meeting, I am going to adjourn now for 15 minutes to seek some clarification around the motions that have been moved.
Oops.